Hey, welcome back to Gideon Stuff. Today we're going to be taking a look at this big boy. This is the Cold Steel SR1 Lite. So let's go ahead and jump right into some size comparisons. Here's the SR1 Lite. Let's move him up just a little bit. Against the Benchmade Bug Out. And the Spyderco PM2. So a little bit bigger than the Bug Out. Just a little bit. Here he is against the Ontario Rat Model 1. And the Rat Model 2. This is a personal custom variant, the R2D2. And here he is against the Civivi Praxis, as well as the Kershaw Bare Knuckle. And last but certainly not least, here is against the Cold Steel 8015. Its brother from a same mother. That wasn't going anywhere. So, as you can see, this is not a small knife by pretty much any measure. In fact, we have a blade length of 4 inches. You can see this here is the Tanto, however you want to say that. There, it also comes in a clip point version. And the overall length is about 9.3, 9.4 inches. So, big knife, thick handle, and look at this blade. This blade is 0.19 inches thick. That is a thick blade. In fact, if we bring out the PM2 again, this is probably almost 2 times the width of the PM2's blade. So yeah, definitely a chunk. And the weight is also pretty large. I don't have that on me right now. I'll probably just edit it in. So, I've had this knife for quite a while. As you can see, I've been using him pretty hard. I tried to clean him up before now, but there's some smudges and some scratches. Sharpened him up a little bit. This has been my chore knife recently. I'm using him a lot for out feeding cows, cutting hay string. And in fact, I'm going to put a clip of that in here in a second. I really like the Tanto blade shape for that specific task, where the way the hay string is in a bale of hay with a drop point, you have to get in there and then kind of drag your knife through. With the Tanto, you just kind of push it in there, just kind of stab it. So I'll put in some clips of that, as well as I'll put in some clips of me cutting some cardboard boxes and some other stuff, and talk a little bit about the blade shape, the way it performs, and the blade steel, a little more detail there. So, yeah. Alright, so let's break down this box, and while we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about the SR1 Lite. So as I already said previously, this is a thick knife. This is a very thick knife. It's meant to be tough. So this is not going to be a great slicer, and no matter how well it's ground, this is a flat grind, by the way, it's not going to be a laser beam. It's not going to be very thin behind the edge, because obviously the blade stock is just too dang thick. So, you know, this isn't going to be great for your slicing tasks. If you're cutting vegetables, you know, cheese, whatever, this isn't it. So if you're thinking about taking this with you on your next Sunday picnic, just why? Just don't take this. This isn't for that. However, it is a hard-working knife, and it does work good at hard work. The blade steel is 8CR13 MOV, and usually when you see that kind of steel, it's like, oh boy. But honestly, I think Cold Steel has done a really good heat treat with this. I've been using this very, very hard for about 2 months, and it's held up really, really well. It's very easy to sharpen, but it has the, as far as I can tell, the edge retention I'd actually place somewhere within that, between a VG10 154 cm, you know, N690 kind of range. It's actually really, really good for 8CR. And as you can tell, even though the knife is super thick, it does cut really, really well. It's a good grind on here. Not a laser beam, but a knife doesn't have to be a laser beam to be ground well. And this is a good example of a tough, chunky knife that's ground very well. I already explained why I went with the Tanto version for my cutting hay string on hay bales when feeding cows. And that's a very specific, you know, usage that's not going to really matter to a whole lot of people. But I do appreciate it. And I also think the Tanto is actually a pretty utilitarian blade shape in general. I think a lot of people could use a Tanto in their everyday life. So how's the action on this guy? Well, it's pretty darn good. In fact, I think it's even better than it has to be. This is a very, very smooth knife. You can flick it out like you just saw. You gotta be careful when closing because it's so smooth. If you're not careful, you will lop a finger off. Now, if you just, you know, slow roll it open, very, very smooth. The thumb studs are fairly comfortable. We'll talk about that more a little bit later. You can even, if you really want to, a little bit of wrist, you can middle finger flick it out, which is really cool. So there's a couple more things I want to talk about concerning the blade. And the first thing is, you might not be able to tell from pictures or from the camera, but this knife actually has a little bit of belly, which is a little bit unique for Tantos, especially the American Tantos, which this is. But it does mean that you can do some pretty interesting cuts. In fact, I don't get the thing on the table. You can actually do cuts that involve a lot of belly. This, by the way, is baling twine, which I was talking about earlier. This stuff is very, very tough on a knife. It's basically plastic rope. And I've had knives in the past that I've been using to cut this stuff that will chip or roll or just go dull very, very quickly. And this knife really, really does handle it pretty well. But anyways, yeah, I was talking about the belly. Let's just do this real quick. You can use that belly a little bit when you're slicing. And that's another great thing about Tanto too, is you have the secondary point here. You have your primary point and your secondary point. So a lot of people say that Cold Steel makes the best Tantos. And I'm not a Sith, so I don't deal in absolutes, but I do think Cold Steel makes a very, very nice Tanto. People also sometimes complain about sharpening Tantos, which I don't understand. Personally, I don't have much of a problem with it. I use on stones, do this edge first, and then on either a smaller stone or maybe even a rod, do this edge, you know, from here this way, from here this way. So yeah. And that curve and that slight little bit of belly in the edge really does give a lot of power. So, the other thing I want to talk about just real quick is the carry. So, that's what it looks like in the pocket. Big fat clip. It's not a discreet carry by any means, but it's not bad. The weight on this guy, about 6.3 ounces. You can get your hand in the pocket past it. The weight doesn't bother me too much. I wear jeans with a belt all the time. What does bother me, though, is just getting it in and out of the pocket. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit, but how I've been carrying this knife is just dropping it in my back pocket. And in fact, I think I'm probably going to take the clip off. I've left it on for now just for the sake of this review, but as soon as this is over, I think I'm probably going to take this clip off and maybe even make a leather carry sheath for this knife right here. But yeah, so let's go back over to the table and talk a little bit more in depth about this guy here. Alright, Gold Seal SR1 Lite. What do I like most about this knife? Well, there's a lot of things, and the first one I'm going to start off with is the price. The original SR1 has G10 green, I believe, with an S35 VN blade. Also comes in a Tanto or clip point. I can't talk today. Oh my gosh. Anyways, those knives come in about in the $150 to $175 range. This one here, both the Tanto and the clip point, are under $60. In fact, I got mine for even less than that on sale. And honestly, I think that's a really, really good deal. I think this is the toughest knife at that $60 and under price range. You have the triad lock, which I really, really like. It's a very, very strong lock, very thick. When it snaps into place, it really has that positive affirmation of, oh yeah, this thing is locked up. Back here, to release a triad lock, you really got to push down pretty far, which means if you're gripping it hard, you're not going to accidentally depress it. That can be a little bit of a trouble when you're trying to unlock it, put it away, but I don't typically mind that too awful much. I do love the blade shape, love the grind. I think the 8CR13 at $60 is, some people might raise some questions, but as I've said already, it performs very, very well. Very well indeed. And honestly, my biggest, the reason I like this knife so much, because I do like this knife a whole lot, is just because I've been using it every day since I got it, just waking up, putting it in my pocket, and heading out to the hay lot to use it, and it does exactly what I want to do, and it doesn't complain, locks up solid. Little tiny bit off center, but that's probably just because I've been using it. I imagine just a twist of the pivot will fix that. And honestly, this knife just feels good in a lot of ways. It feels very strong, feels very tough, and also it's super comfortable too. You have these edges here of the grivery. These are plastic scales, by the way. They're not really chamfered or rounded off, but they're not super sharp. You got a pretty nice choke up position. Hold it back here, hold it here. And especially when I was using it, I was using gloves. I was wearing gloves most of the time, and it was very, very comfortable in that regard. The thumb studs are a little bit sharp when you're using it with your bare hands, but it's not a big deal. And with gloves, you don't notice it at all. The lock bar is very sharp. Back of the blade is very sharp, which again only bothers me when I'm not wearing gloves. And I think if you're going to be buying this knife, if you're the kind of person who's looking at this knife and you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to pick that up, I need that in my life, then you're probably wearing gloves, or you're a cold steel collector and that kind of stuff is just the name of the game for you, and you can handle it. So that's great. Another thing that's great about this knife is it's fully ambidextrous. The clip here can mount to the other side, and triad lock, full ambi, thumb studs on both sides. That's something I appreciate a lot. Not necessarily for me. I'm a right-handed guy, but I actually have a lot of left-handed people in my life that I'm, thinking about when it comes to knives. My cousin and best friend, he's left-handed. My girlfriend happens to be left-handed. My youngest brother, not thinking about getting him a knife really anytime soon, but he's left-handed as well. And so I really appreciate seeing companies, throw on some lefty friendly features. That was a really clunky sentence, but oh well. So yeah, that's everything that I really, really like about this knife, is that it's honestly just a hardworking tool. And when it comes to cold steel knives, like when I got this knife, I got it to be a hardworking tool. I saw it and I said, that looks like a knife that I can use. That looks like a knife that I can beat on, and not super expensive. And it's fulfilled that purpose very well for me. I'm very, very pleased with it. I don't think this is a knife that, someone who's collecting Riots or Wii knives or, things like that, this probably isn't going to be super appealing for them. But for someone who, either like me, works outside a lot, construction, jobs like that, this is probably a very good option for you. It's tough, it's made well, it's inexpensive, and it's pretty easy to maintain as well. So that's, in my opinion, the very, very best aspects of this knife. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that I think aren't so great. All right, so let's look at some of the negatives of the Cold Steel SR1 Lite. So I'm going to start off with the grivery scales. Some people might not like this just because it's grivery, and I mean, I get that. I don't mind it personally, but some people might. The thing I do mind about it, well, I'm not sure that it's something I mind necessarily, but this texturing here is very textured. This knife is not gonna slip out of your hand at all. But it means that the pocket clip, I mean, that is a stiff clip. This knife is an SOB to get in and out of your pocket. This will tear your pocket up and quite possibly eat the rest of your pants too. It's very, very hard to get in and out of the pocket, which is why, as I said already, I'm going to be taking the clip off. Or another option that some people do is they'll sand under the clip. This is a common problem with cold steel knives. I had to do it with my 8015, as I actually sanded the G10 down under the clip so I could actually get it in and out of my pocket. And this might be, that's something that if you're going to carry this knife, I actually think you have to either sand down under there or just carry the knife in a sheath or just loose in your pocket, because that clip is not going to work. And honestly, there's not that much space under the clip at all. In fact, there's just... Stand there, boy. In fact, there's even just a hair more room under the clip of the Rat 1, and this clip is far more springy. So that's something that I don't really like, but that's a common problem with all cold steel knives. And if you're buying a cold steel knife, you know that it's a problem, and you know what you're asking for. The next thing is this knife isn't for... Yikes. It's a good thing that's a thick knife. This knife isn't for everyone. 4 inches of blade. That right there is illegal in a lot of places. In fact, some places even have laws against, Tanto knives, which in that case you get the clip point, but you know what I mean. It's thick. A lot of people don't want this in their pocket. It's heavy, 6.3 ounces. I don't mind that weight. A lot of people do. A lot of people really do. And honestly, just working this knife, the Triad lock is, it does take quite a bit of power to push that down and close the knife. This one is smoother than some cold steels I've had, but still. For example, I talked about how, like my girlfriend, for example. This is not a knife I'd get her, even though it's full lefty. No, this is not a knife I'd get my girlfriend. It's just not. I already got her a bug out. But this knife is limited to a certain number of people. And in fact, I know right now, watching this video, there's some people who are like, yeah, I could use that knife. And there's other people who probably didn't even click on the video who are saying, no, that's not for me. And that's understandable. That's understandable. It's not everyone needs this. Not everyone needs this. Most people can get by just fine with, this. And even myself included, after I'd get, back in from work or, on weekends, when I was done with my hard, the hard work, this, out of my pocket, fold it up, back in the drawer, and I'd swap it out for something like this. Because I just didn't want to be carrying this guy around all day. Next thing. So the pivot is T15, which I really, really like. These screws back here are T6, which I don't really like. They're easy to strip out, and I wish they'd gone with T15, T8s, or maybe even T10s. That would have been kind of cool, but that's my complaint. Another thing is, you see there on the lock, back there, it's a little bit uneven. I mean, I don't really notice it when I'm using it, but, if you're going to sit down and just kind of admire your knife, that might be something where, you look at that and you're like, ugh, cringe a little bit. But that's something that's just going to vary from model to model. And honestly, at this price, I don't really care about it at all. So for me, that's everything that's bad. Is, the knife's not for everyone. Carrying it requires after purchase modification, and the hardware's a little bit off, and that thing back there. But you know what? That's not so many complaints. This is a great knife, and I really, really like it. All right, SR1 final opinion. I've said several times throughout the course of this video, I like this knife. I like it a lot. And even the things that cause problems, the grivery being very, very well textured causes problems with the clip. But when you're using the knife, it's good to have that texture. It's really good to have that very positive, retention in your hand. The only thing, I should have mentioned this when I was talking about what I don't like. I wish there was a little bit of jimping on top here. Put your thumb on. I guess this jimping does kind of work, but I don't know. I don't really like that. I'd rather it be here. Anyways, getting sidetracked. I think this is a perfectly fine. Whoa, a little bit far in. There we go. I think this is a really, really good knife. And at the price, I honestly do think this is the toughest budget knife out there. I mean, with a blade this thick, and I mean, look at this. There is no distal taper in this. It is this thick. The blade is as thick. Yeah, it's just all the way to here. And this isn't even distal taper. That's just, because of the tanto grind. But anyways, very solid knife, very strong knife, a knife that I think a lot of people will appreciate. And for those people, this is a fantastic knife, and there's no reason why they shouldn't get one. For people who aren't, looking for a knife to just beat on, for people who aren't looking for, something that will stand up to abuse and that you can just hammer into the side of a tree, I mean, there's no reason to get this. If you're You know, if your daily carry is, you know, you prefer the Benchmade bug out, then this is definitely not going to be for you. You know, if you just want a knife to open packages with and, you know, maybe occasionally use it for, you know, something a little bit rougher, the Rat 1. But if you're consistently using your knives very hard in very tough and demanding situations, you can't go wrong with this. I mean, I know Cold Steel makes a lot of other knives that are, you know, very, very tough, probably even a little bit tougher than this guy. But for me, the biggest thing about this is the price. For this, I mean, you are getting, and yet another thing, the SR1, the regular one, is a very, very popular Cold Steel model. It's very respected. It's, you know, kind of one of their flagship models. And now you have a chance to have that knife and that kind of strength at an affordable price point. You know, I think anyone could save up and get this knife. And, I mean, yeah, you're losing a little bit, you know, the blade steel's a downgrade, the handle material is a downgrade, but, I mean, they do okay with the 8CR. The handle works. This knife works. And if you're buying a knife to work, I'll say it again, this knife works. You know, a lot of people, I think, when it comes to Cold Steel knives, they slap on that tactical or tacticool label. And and a lot of their knives do fall into that, you know, tactical use range. You know, like the Tiger's Claw, I think is what it's called, is one that comes to mind. Definitely a folder based around fighting. But honestly, for me, I think a lot of times Cold Steel models are centered around hard work. You know, they're centered around people who are going to be using their knives in a rough way, and they need a knife that's dependable and won't fail. I mean, and especially, you know, the Andrew Dimko designs, you know, stuff like that. I honestly think that Cold Steel makes some of the best working man knives ever. And this is another great example of a knife that's affordable, useful, and built like a tank. And can I recommend it? 100%. 100%. If you're a hardworking guy or gal and you want a hardworking knife, here it is. Alright, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye now.